Hello and welcome to the second panel of this Data for Development conference that is happening parallel to the EU Africa the Journey hackathon. I'm very happy to be here today with you all and welcoming you on Facebook. This panel we're going to have today, right now, is going to be on a very, very important topic. It's on food security. And today we already had one topic on education, and these two topics combined, I think, are the ones responsible for the majority of the teams competing in the hackathon, which just shows you the importance of both education and food security as it talks to the participants, to the hackathon participants at this event. This event would not be possible without the generous support of the Estonian Development Cooperation, the African Union, the delegation of the European Union to the African Union, Team Europe, and Luxembourg Aid and Development. And it's being implemented by Garage 48 and Smart Africa. Having said that, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome on the panel four distinguished panelists with whom I hope we will have a very interesting discussion around the topics that are important for Africa when it talks about food security. So I'd like to give the word to the panelists to tell me a little bit about your background and a little bit about your involvement with this topic, and then we can have a discussion on the topic. So let's start with David. We have David Luganda from the Africa Farmers Media Center, who is reaching us from, is it from Ghana?
Uganda.
Uganda, right. All right. So David, tell us a little bit about your background.
I'm Luganda David from Uganda, and I've been working with smallholder farmers in the villages, mainly promoting climate action solutions of solar dryers, mainly locally made, using local artisans, and this has enabled reduction of post-harvest losses, mainly crops, cassava and vegetables. And through this, I've been also leveraging on the existing cooperatives in Uganda. This is CBS Pewosa cooperative, whereby women engage in order to save and also access finance from within their communities. So we have been working with these women, and I lead the team mainly on post-harvest handling, value addition, and also promoting the food systems in Uganda. And this also disseminating climate information, which is also a tool to help smallholder farmers make improved decisions on what they should plant, and also giving them agronomic practices and ecosystem-based adaptation approaches of mulching, agroforestry, so that they can come up with better yields and also fight climate change without spoiling the environment or degrading the environment.
Thank you.
And another issue is also enabling the youth to come up with climate solutions of making briquettes, which are fuel used, and also they are good for girls and women. They are not smoky and they burn for a long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David, for that. Next up, we have Kenneth Nelson from Farm 360 Global. Kenneth, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So give us a little bit about your background and connection with this topic.
So I see myself to be a farmer, not just any farmer, but a farmer who is enlightened to change, the way we do farming or we see agriculture in Africa. I have a background in agribusiness management, and I had it from K University here in Ghana. So afterwards, basically, I went into the corporate life, but I realized that there's a lot to be done in the agricultural space in Ghana and in Africa as a whole. So, and hence, I run Farm 360 Global, which happens to do with a crowdfunding platform to help farmers with inputs, quality inputs as seeds and fertilizers, for them to go into farming and make the best out of what you're doing. So I'm proud to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth. Next up, we have Philip from the Ayina think tank. Philip, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, and thank you for the pleasure, and I'm delighted to be here. My intersection with this particular topic starts with my work back in 2015 with No Cafe, a coffee farm organization in Uganda, where I work with smallholder Ugandan farmers. born of that experience, I sort of learned of the accessibility paradox. That accessibility paradox has today birthed my early stage startup called Agri-Logistics, the transition that I'm making from Ayina into agri-logistics. And at agri-logistics, I'm passionate about not just professionalizing agri-commodity logistics across sub-Saharan Africa, but equally as well about digitizing the food supply chain. I look forward to having a more broad and prospective conversation. Thank you.
Super. Thank you so much for that. And last but not least, we have Adaku Omidosu, who's from SCOPEinsight and joining us, I think, from the Netherlands. Am I right?
Correct. My name is Adaku Omidosu. I work as a strategic partnership manager for SCOPEinsight. And what we do at Scope is we're a rating agency. Basically, what we do is we look at the smallholder cooperatives, and then we're able to provide an assessment of their performance. And then you can use the data that you gather in that process to share with the different stakeholders, be it the multilaterals, be it the banks, be it anybody, right, that needs this data. Because what we have found out is that there's a dearth of data in the African agriculture. So if you ask a lot of banks, why you're not lending to the cooperative, the reason is that they don't have farmer data, right? And if you have the data, you can promote access to finance, you can report on living income, you can report on other things. So that's what I do. But prior to working with SCOPEinsight, I have been in the agri-tech sector for over a decade. And what we basically do is we have a platform that sort of links smallholder farmers to markets, to inputs, and of course, provide tailorized agri-service. So that's a bit about me.
Super. Thank you, Adaku, for that. So let's get to it. I mean, Africa has a continent where I think around 80% of people are still working in the agriculture sector. So it's a very, very labor-intense topic. We can cover everything from the production, the logistics, getting the food to the table, the whole market of it. And so there's a lot of topics that are, I think, relevant here. And at the same time, Africa has a very, very young continent. Majority of the population is very young. And we see that, in this hackathon, this topic was chosen by a lot of young people as something that they're passionate about, and they're coming up with innovative ideas. So what I'd like to put to you as the panelists here is, what are some of the most interesting and most challenging aspects when it comes to food security that would attract young people to stay active in this field and not just run away to some of the more some of the more sexy opportunities out there. So what are the important challenges that the youth can tackle and solve when it comes to food security? And perhaps I'll start with Adaku.
Yeah, great question. Great question. So Africa has one of the highest internet penetration. Even the use of mobile phones, for instance, in Nigeria, has grown over the past decade. And this has also, with in a country like Nigeria, where you have the telcos now operating all over Africa, a lot of software development, app development has happened in the field of agri-tech. So you see that folks are able to use the mobile technology to develop apps that actually help farmers. In terms of what is cool to do, I mean, there's a lot of coolness around using technology to solve things like access to market, things like logistics, things like post-harvest losses. These are, like very key issues and key problems that are really prevalent on the ground. So these opportunities create such a unique opportunity for young people to be able to solve this challenge. And then we also have the issues of how to be climate smart or climate smart agriculture, regenerative agriculture. These opportunities are there because they're really cool things that really, really change the way the world has evolved, or the world, how people eat, how people shop, how people produce things. And these opportunities are there really for young people to get into. So if you look at some of the interesting opportunities that people that have gotten funding in Africa, a lot of them are agri-tech, a lot of them are platform, a lot of them are agri-logistics, a lot of them are doing drone services. And you can see that these are a market that has quite a large opportunity for young people to play in.
Yeah. David, what's your take on this? David, I think you're muted.
My take on this, you have mentioned of the challenges affecting Africa, and we have to know that we have to put this in context that over 800 million people are going to bed hungry in the world. But as Africans, since agriculture is our backbone, and today we are talking about food security, we have to understand that where does this food come from? We have seen conflict in Ethiopia, Nigeria, and some Sudan. So this is affecting food systems. But the role of the youth to come up, they have to come up with startups which can enable one to link to the markets, so that even if you are confined in Nigeria, at least you can access a product. Take an existence of this nexus of COVID-19, climate change, and conflict, whereby COVID-19 confined many people, but without these technologies, they would have made no markets for people. But if we start up these hackathons, for example, this which is taking place, it can enable the youth solve the challenges which are affecting Africa and hence lead to transformation change. And also so that we can have local solutions, at least which can enable us achieve the sustainable development goals and Agenda 2063. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip. You look like a young person, and we talk about how to bring young people into this sector, and what are some of the challenges and opportunities for young people. Not just the role of technology, which I'm sure there is a role for technology, but my question to you is, what attracted you to this sector? And how can we attract others, that are younger to come and take on these challenges?
All right, great question. So I'm going to sort of cut it into two. One is I'll start with some of the trends that are driving this, and then secondly I'll dive into some of the opportunities that coexist and where startups could sort of engage. So let's start with some of the trends. Previously, when you look at the post-harvest area of the value chain, across all agricultural value chains, opportunities have been at 25%. Those opportunities over time from 2015 have grown to over 40%, and we project them to consequently increase. As such, because why have these opportunities emerged? One is because the agriculture sector for a long time has been distorted, uncoordinated, and fragmented. This offers an opportunity for young innovators to come and offer solutions. Number two, which is a big driver today, is urbanization. And I think I like to disagree with my friends that talk about climate change. Actually, they view climate change as an opportunity for innovators, but it's not really a bigger trend that is driving young people here. I think the rate of urbanization that is emerging from rapid transformation, whereby we now see the emergence of mega cities, towns, and municipalities, whereby villages are now closer to town cities. And as such, consequently, very many young people are moving into cities. We've seen the emergence of a new middle class, ultimately. And what that has created is created a new populace, a new consumer base that is sophisticated in nature, creating new markets in the agriculture sector and new ways of processing food, opening up opportunities in distribution, warehousing, trading. So this has attracted young people into the sector, in my view. But if we're to talk about the opportunities, I want to focus on two things. One is I want to talk about open innovation. The second I want to talk about is digitization. Let's start with digitization or digitalization, whichever of the two we could adopt as a terminology here. So when you talk about digitization, there are three key drivers here. One is visibility, the other is traceability, and third is predictability. Under visibility, the opportunities for now, if somebody is doing market linkages or a young person wants to do market linkages, there's an opportunity for smart contracts now, creating visibility from end to end whereby I could fix a contract either on a fixed price or on a floating price. Those of us who've done international trade, or those who trade in the agriculture sector, you know this. This is how the market really trades. The second bit under visibility, specifically when you look at logistics, is how do we improve transparency? By transparency, looking at estimated time of arrival in logistics or real-time tracking. These are some of the issues that have been consequently emerging. Number two, when you talk about predictability, under predictability, we're looking at technology that could help us predict supply and demand. So data is key and central to this. The other bit is what can we use that data when it comes to climate change? So predictability falls under that. And then lastly, would be the question of traceability. And under traceability, we're looking at data-driven platforms and how these data-driven platforms are able to capture data from market to dock, and then from farm to dock, and then from dock to market. And then lastly is the question of, not the question, but fundamentally the opportunity of open innovation. And pre-existing players are being suffocated with a whole bit of innovation. So basically, you ask the question, where do ideas come from? Young people offer this solution. They actually have got ideas. They look at the value chain. They see opportunities. Unlike pre-existing players, open innovation offers a platform for existing startups. I actually saw one called Scalable Open Innovation today. As part of the people doing the hackathon. It's by Martin, a young man called Martin. And part of the opportunity with open innovation is that it actually gives startups the opportunity and young people to take their solutions to market really fast and scale really fast, because what they do offer pre-existing corporate players or agribusiness players is this thing we call one, zero marginal cost of productivity, and then two is continuous processing improvement and innovation. So I like to rest it at that. But it's a lot of data, a lot of information. So in
Super.
So yeah.
No, thank you, Philip. I think very passionate plea to bring people into this field, especially the young people. And I have to say, you had me at smart contracts. But I want to pass it on to Kenneth. And Kenneth, you seem like a more reasonable man. You seem like you've gone through this, and you can talk some sense into Philip. And my question to you, very simply, is the sector, is the agri-tech, or let's call it, the food sector in Africa mature enough that it can take advantage of some of the opportunities that Adaku was talking about, and now Philip also mentioned, all this data-driven approach, the smart contracts? Is the sector that mature that it can take advantage of these approaches, or is most of the innovation and the opportunities around something, where David was talking about, this less polluting briquettes, the more rural things that we imagine as being the agriculture, the more sustainable, self-sustainable, living wage type of approach of farming? So where do you see this? Where do you see, the maturity of the sector in Africa?
Okay, so in comparison, I would say we are not that mature in respect to harnessing the opportunities in the agricultural sector in Africa, because as much as we see ourselves, putting out a lot of ideas, and we're trying to scale our innovations and ideas, we should look at sustainability, because as much as, yes, we have a lot of companies out there, but then are we seeing the impact? What is the impact of the solutions out there? Are we able to let the last mile, or should I say, I call them the last mile, smallholder farmers in the village have access to the innovation and the technologies out there? Adoption is also equally important, because if you have a sophisticated idea or innovation or technology, and the farmer in the village is not able to use your solution or see the sense in whatever solution that you're providing, it doesn't make sense to have it. So in terms of maturity, I believe we are not yet there, though the promise is there. We have a lot of promising ideas, we have a lot of energy, and the youth is also pushing. But in terms of maturity, it will take us a while to get there. And it depends on the way we approach these solutions out there.
So Kenneth, where do you find are the biggest opportunities and the biggest challenges that are calling people to come to this sector?
I believe it's the mindset one. The mindset, because currently, yes, we have a lot of people who would want to get into the agriculture space, but then the passion and the zeal to go there is not there. The determination or the fire, I call it the fire in the belly, is not there. One failure, two failure, they are done. They don't want to, continue with their initiative. So in terms of the opportunities are cut across from production in terms of production to the supplying side or the consumer side. So opportunities are cut across from every side of the supply chain. But in terms of realizing that it's not there, in terms of the zeal or the fire in the belly or the determination to do that is not there. A lot of people want white collar jobs, right? They want to go sit in an air conditioning office with their suits and tie on, and be greeted and given all sorts of names. But here's the case that the real problems is deep down there. You have to get your hands really, really dirty. But the question is, who is ready to get his hands dirty?
That's a good point. How many of these are ready to get their hands dirty? Adaku, let me turn to you because, perhaps being in the Netherlands gives you a different perspective now, and you talked about the accessibility of some of these technologies to the farmers now with the adoption of smartphones on the rise, the availability of data to make sure that some of data I mean connection to the internet for some of these farmers in the more rural areas. So from your perspective, where is the adoption of some of these technologies greater in Africa? Where do you see the biggest hotbeds for innovation in Africa when it comes to the food sector? And I think I think one of you guys mentioned about this post-harvest line. So where do you see the adoption of some of these newer technologies? Is it mostly on the post-harvest, or is there any opportunities for innovation on the fields, where people actually need to get their hands dirty?
Great question. So a lot of what we're seeing is, if you look at the soil to shelf pipeline, at the soil level, you have technologies that are speaking around improved seeds, right? So you have the likes of CJAR, who are, and you have a lot of seed companies that are sending out a lot of improved seeds to these smallholder farmers. But where I have seen a lot of activities is around really mapping all these individual activities on a supply chain or on a platform. So you see a lot of agri-tech companies that are farm to fork. So they help with getting the seeds, they help with giving the farmers inputs, they get with the logistic. Because it's sort of like, if you focus on one, then you probably would have not solved all the problem. Maybe the markets are not large enough for you to maximize revenue on a particular value chain. But what we have also seen is that things like cold post-harvest loss. I know there's a startup in Nigeria called Cold Hub who is focusing on that. But again, those things are very, very capital intensive. So for young people, it's really like, where are the easiest entry points to get into? Exactly. Because if you're looking at inputs, that's a lot of cost. If you're looking at outputs, that's a lot of cost. But what is easily possible is actually building this digital platform that you can link everybody in, and then you can get a margin out of it. And this is what we have seen a lot that, I was looking at the top 10 startups that have received funding in Africa. Only one is involved in drone. I think it's called robotics in South Africa. They do drone services. And then you have another one, agri-protein, that really turns food waste into, this is pure innovation in protein feeds, right? But the rest of them are really agri-tech platform using this. That's where you see, I think, because the entry point is easier, because right. for robotics, for instance, you have to be thinking about the drones, acquiring them, maintaining them, using them, and then of course selling them in such a regimented manner that you can get, maybe do a pay-per-use model and all of that. So those capital costs are really high. But to build a platform, normal software guys, have implementation guys on the field, have your tech team, it's easier to get into. And again, the problem is also myriad, right? Because you're talking about different countries, different localities, different value chains, and you really can do a lot in that sector. So, and if you look at the comparison between here and there, the challenge that a lot of entrepreneurs have is that it's what we call build your own infrastructure. You practically have to build everything. You have to build the road, you have to build this, you have to build that to get things to work.
So
but
very hard to get started.
On the other side, yes, but on the other side here, when you look at the more developed countries, these assets are here already. You just have to plug in your own solution in the place where you see the trouble, and then you're able to have other complementary assets that are already functioning that is easy for you to play. So these are the challenges that the entrepreneurs have to face. So I guess what you typically will see is people getting into value chains or opportunities that just have very easy entry overhead cost for them to be able to do stuff.
Yeah, David, I kind of like the way that I think Kenneth and Adaku have framed this, which is in terms of, what is the impact that some of these solutions can have, some of these startups can have on the sector. And I would put it to you in terms of, the impact-driven startups, where are they operating? If you look at the whole value chain, if you look at the whole process from the beginning, from the seed part until the food ends up on the table, and you look at what a massive issue this is in terms of self-sustainability for certain countries, self-sustainability for the whole continent, then where is the place in this chain where these startups working on this food security can have the biggest impact so that we can provide food for all the people?
Thank you very much for that question, actually. But I'd want to put this in perspective that in order to transform our economies and our continent, we should avoid working in silos. And also we should enable so that the youth can understand the whole value chain. I know there is a part where the youth don't want to go, for example, in agriculture, digging, tilting the land, but they need to understand where this food is coming from before they put it on the applications they have or startups they have developed. So along the value chain, it is very, very good so that one can come on the marketing part of it, linking the farmer to the markets or to the final consumer. This means that one has provided a solution which is eliminating the middleman, hence making a farmer have a bigger bargaining power. When a farmer has a bigger bargaining power, this means that you are promoting gender equality, because we see that our mothers in the villages are the ones who are tilting the land, they're the ones engaged in agriculture, yet the men do this less. So this, you are enabling the other last person to get at least a bigger economic rent along the agro-value chain. So enabling this linkage, this will enable sustainability, and also it will enable economic development, which will enable resources into our country.
Super, thank you. I think that's a very good perspective, especially when it talks about empowering these guys who are really getting their hands dirty on the first stages of the whole production. And I like how you brought in this gender equality there, specifically when it touches this point. Philip, I'm going to put it to you now. We talked about impact. We talked about the maturity of the sector. We talked about some of the aspects that you were mentioning, and when it comes to visibility, right, and the whole value chain. So what's your take on this? Is the youth ready to get their hands dirty and starting, plowing the fields and understanding where the food comes from before they start transforming the logistics of it and the accessibility to markets? Or are we just expecting, that robots are going to take over, they're going to do the dirty work on the fields, and then we are left to enjoy the spoils and just making sure that the food gets somewhere and we profit off of that? What's your take?
I think I'd like to disagree to a point, and from a very personal point of view. One is, I don't think you need to get your hands dirty to literally understand the pain that smallholder farmers go through. But what's fundamentally key and important is that when you have an understanding of the entire value chain, that means what happens at farm level to market. So the entire journey, pre-production, production, then the whole post value chain dynamics involved in the terminologies, who does what, when, what kind of livelihood do they, sorry, what kind of day do they live, what kind of life do they live day to day. So I don't think that necessarily young people are going to do this. In fact, I think we're asking the wrong question when we talk about impact. We spent the past decade with the cooperative movement, and we're discussing about the welfare of farmers. So we started cooperatives, we try to push middlemen out of the value chain. But actually, what studies have now shown us is that middlemen increase, while we cannot ascertain their impact, positive or negative, on the livelihoods or the welfare of smallholder farmers. They actually certainly increase the efficiency of the agricultural marketing system, or rather increase the degree of commercialization in the agriculture sector. That said, the question for this generation and for this decade needs to be a question of how do we make agriculture more economically viable? And that's the question young people are interested in answering. Does making agriculture more economically viable for smallholder farmers mean drones to help them with the irrigation? Does making agriculture more economically viable for them mean access to affordable and reliable logistics solutions? This is my take on it. But there's quite a lot that is lost in there. But I just wanted to just kind of respond to the question of impact in itself. And then the other bit being that of, if young people do really need to get down to do the tilting before they do the innovation. My worry, though, but I must express this, is I'm going to give you a very live case study. I want to give you the case study of Uber. Uber should open the world's eyes of the power of an aggregation platform. Now, consequently, everybody, even young people across agricultural value chains, are trying to deploy aggregation platforms. But actually, the aggregation platform is great at convening a community of trackers. But what it cannot do is it cannot actually change their behavior. In brief, the real problem in logistics was poor professionalism. You can imagine. Accessibility was to be addressed by dealing with professionalism. So my bigger point being, developing the platform is great. You can have an aggregation platform, you can have a data-driven platform, but market-based interventions have got to back up that platform if you're going to be successful in agricultural value chains in sub-Saharan Africa.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Kenneth, you had your hand raised, so do you have a counterpoint here?
Yes, I just want to disagree with his saying that you don't have to get your hands dirty in order to basically understand some of the pains that the smallholder farmers or whoever you're developing the solutions to are going through. Because even you have to be in their shoes to know the kind of solutions you can actually come up with that would actually solve their pain, right? Because first case, you can have a so-called best technology out there, but then they wouldn't basically use it because they don't understand, right? And they need to understand the importance of the solution that you're bringing on board before they can actually adopt to it. Let me take two scenarios, right? I started a drone company here in Ghana, right? And it was drone spraying for agriculture in Ghana here, and it was the first of its kind. Now, when we took it down to the smallholder farmers for them to use, we had to do a series of farm demonstrations for them to see the effectiveness of the drone spraying. But even after that, I had a professor who is also a lecturer in Ghana here, still doubting the efficiency and the of the drone technology as compared to the traditional way of spraying our farms. So as I said, if you don't understand what these people are going through and come up with solutions that are relevant to them, then you cannot come up with a solution that will be adopted, and hence it will affect your sustainability for you to be relevant and continue to produce or provide such services for a long time. Because here's the case that we're looking at: what solutions are important, what solutions can actually solve these things that we are talking about, and for how long can you continue to solve these solutions. And they have to know your services before you can be sustainable in long.
Makes sense, makes sense. David, you had something you wanted to add?
Thank you very much, Kenneth, for that submission. But also, in addition, I would say that since I've been working with smallholder farmers for the last 6 to 10 years, but one challenge we have been facing is the new technology and new startups which they bring to these farmers. So when someone has not done his research well, not literature review, but research on the ground, knowing the solution which I'm going to provide for these people, what will it, how will they use the usability, compatibility, network connection. We have seen that many people are having mobile phones right now, and the farmers are having mobile phones. But the only issue they're using those mobile phones to is social media, from social media and also texting. But when you add in another application, for example, disseminating climate information, agronomic practices, you need a more digitalized capacity building for these people in the village. So even the startups, for example, for this hackathon, I'll take an example of one of the participants who has pitched his story, project, who's going to work in sub-Saharan Africa on reducing floods and also providing food security on farms. So he has to make sure that he understands the ground and which people are going to use this application. A lot of money has been wasted. It's good, the usability is good, but not good for the community who are using it. And the literacy levels in Africa, we have to make sure that most of the people, they're having smartphones, but they don't know how to read. For case in point, I've been disseminating climate information until I reached a point of knowing that even if someone has studied, he doesn't understand a simple terminology of above normal or below normal, or cessation, or onset of the rain. So
I think you bring a very, very important point to this discussion, because when we were talking about the maturity of the sector, this is exactly what we're talking about.
So you have to go deeper into understanding the dynamics of these people, how the agriculture system work, how these people are working. And remember, our women, being gender sensitive when you are making these startups and also the technology part of it. E-agriculture, they don't care about the women, but you have to know that 50% are the women who are conducting agriculture in the villages. And these are the people who didn't go further in school, and these are the people who don't have radios. The radios is controlled by the man. So he has to embrace this technology, and you have brought it on board, but he can't use it, and is leading a merry-go-round of agriculture, and he can't also embrace it and disseminate this information to other people. So you have to make sure that you have to understand, you have to feel the soil. I've not mentioned that you have to go and touch in the soil, but you have to feel what is on ground so that you don't waste money and resources plus time. Back to you.
Yeah, I think, Philip, you had your hand raised. I don't know if there's a point you want to make.
Yeah, I did. I think you sort of caught it out of context. Suffice to say, I'll sort of restate it in a very simple term. I think the question, which is fundamentally key and at the center of every entrepreneur journey, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that all the entrepreneurs in the hackathon have been, by their lead mentors and the mentors and coaches, have been told this. It starts with empathy at the end of the day. And empathy is just definitely, like I said, having to understand what is the day-to-day life of the smallholder farmer. But and once you do understand what the issues are in terms of, if you're able to empathize with them, then you have the answer to the question of how. Because the idea is just simply the what. The magic is always the how. I'm purely telling you this from an entrepreneur perspective, right? And I'm being extremely optimistic. But, I'm also drawing from my 5 years of experience working smallholder farmers, and specifically in the coffee value chain. And my view is that empathy has got to be at the center of it. They cannot be, true entrepreneurship is not devoid of empathy. Yeah. I always state that true entrepreneurship is not devoid of empathy.
I think that's a very, very good advice. Very good advice to all the participants at the hackathon, specifically in this challenge. But I think for all the participants in the hackathon, this empathy and making sure you know the target audience of whose problem you're solving, and making sure that you talk to them and understand the problem. And having said that, Adaku, I want to bring it to you and to ask you a fundamental question here, which is, whose problem are we solving with this? So when we talk about food security, are we solving the problem of getting food on the table? So is it a question of making sure that food arrives to the table of the people that need it the most? Or is the target audience of the solutions we're developing the farmers? And of course they go hand in hand, and hopefully there's a connection between the two. But if I would, if you would have to define the target audience with whom you need to have empathy when it comes to the topic of food security, are we talking about making solutions that make the lives of farmers better, easier, and in a way that they can earn a living wage, so that we encourage more people to get their hands dirty in this farming sector? Or on the other hand, we take a broader perspective, and at the end of the day, what we want is food on the table in the most efficient process possible, so that we can feed the continent by itself, so that the solutions come from Africa to Africa, and therefore, it's a different ball game. So what's your take on this? And of course, I'd like to hear everyone's opinion. But Adaku, let's start with you.
Thanks. So you sort of asked me the question and then you answered it. Yeah. Well, I took the liberty of looking at the dictionary to understand what food security means.
Good.
And it actually means sufficient food, affordable food, nutritious food. So food has to be sufficient, it has to be affordable, it has to be nutritious. 2050 will be 2.5 billion people. The people that are producing the food are still one of the poorest people in the world. The value of money spent in food in Africa is still one of the highest in the world. So you see, we have impoverished producers, expensive food, and not available food, not enough food for everybody. So that's really taking a step back to say, if I were to rephrase this question, I would say, it should be about providing sufficient food. It should be about providing affordable food. It should be about providing nutritious food. Because again, if you look at, in terms of the capacity of the children that we are producing in Africa, I think in the world we have one of the highest number of malnourished children. And you know what nutrition does to bring formation and all of that, right? And then be able to make sure that the next generation has the cerebral power to meet the demands of the future. So
absolutely.
If we are to think about this, we now need to think about, how does my solution help? And then of course there's a lot of talk now around climate change, about how the world is evolving and how this climate change affects even agriculture. I was watching a documentary in Niger where a lady was saying, you could see the land mass over 10 years, the land has receded, there is no water, and so they have less water to produce more food. So if we think about all these problems, to think about how do we solve this problem on a much larger scale, not just the farmer. The farmer is just one part of the equation. There are other players in the equation. There are other problems that we need to solve. Then that tells us that as entrepreneurs, that there's just so much to look at, so much value chain, and we can all decide and say, which part of this is very important? How do we do more for less? How do we make it equitable for everyone? And how do we make the process? And why do we have to make it difficult for our people?
Exactly.
Why should farming be very difficult?
Exactly. No, I love that perspective. I love that sort of, let's take a step back and really make sure that we have affordable food to as many people as possible in the most nutritious way possible, without making the lives of the ones that are getting their hands dirty difficult. So how can we improve the lives of these people? Gentlemen, what's your take? David, perhaps we start with you.
Actually, I've seen my colleague giving a good submission, but according to me, we have to understand that if these startups come in, they are doing they are doing extension, most of them. I see them from the extension part of it, giving agro inputs, knowledge to these smallholder farmers. And also, to go back to your question, is that we need to know that we are not alone in the world. when you're addressing issues. And also the farmer knows that I'm producing this food for someone. So we have been training farmers to make them know that in case you are producing food, make sure that you are producing it for someone, for a certain market. Don't just farm, don't just grow food in case you are doing for commercial. So here we are targeting many people. If startup comes up, we are targeting farmers, markets, agro input dealers, climate change information. This mainly for agro. This is agro advisories, and also for the economy, because we have seen this contributing to our GDP in the country. So if we are to make a better startup, it has to also be inclusive for everyone, so that everyone has his own space on that platform. But also,
David,
take an example of Facebook.
No, go on.
Take an example of Facebook. That's what I've been urging for the youth. Instead of building new things, you can start using Facebook. It has everyone. You can sell your tomatoes, you can sell your anything, agricultural food, you can sell your value-added food, processed food on Facebook. So it's a matter of joining the platform so that you can learn a lot on the marketplace tab, so that you can learn and also get the market. So making such a platform means that it has enabled one to get whatever he wants in one stock center, so that it does not divert from other,
David,
so that he cannot lack knowledge.
David, I want to ask you specifically, because you've been the one bringing it up during this discussion, the role of women and the support that we can provide women that are working in this sector. We talked about, the helping them more, the gender equality issue when it comes to food production. So I want to ask you, what do you see, or what does the panel see as some of the most important issues affecting women working in this sector, and how can we empower them? Is it access to microcredit? Is it access to some of the tools that we've been discussing? Improving living wage conditions. What are some of the most important issues? And we're kind of running out of time, so let's try to keep the answers brief as well. But I didn't want to end the panel without talking on addressing this topic.
Actually, I will just put this in perspective that using this African proverb, that hunger affects a common man who's a slave. Hunger affects a slave, and also hunger affects the king. So we have to know that in order to get a solution for hunger is food, but where does the food come from? And we have to look to the biggest consequence, which is plowing, or which is digging the land, and these are women. So we have seen that in order to empower these women is to be realistic on ground, come up with policies and programs which enable them inclusive. This can go to even the gender pay. If you look at the pay, in case a man has done work and also a woman has done work, most times they pay a lot a man because of being energetic. But remember, most of the times the woman has done the work. So, and also, in case you are providing, for example, providing tips, I can call them tips on the product you are selling. In case this is coming from a village saving allowance association led by women, at least we can give them a bonus in order to engage them and also do more. Training them in value addition. I've been doing this in value addition so that they can add value on their crops, and this can enable them get a higher market. And also, if you see that if you can enable women, they can be more productive than men, because men don't have time to be at home. They have a lot of work to do, and they engage a lot. So we have to empower them from the startup you have made, or from the political will, from the policy level, political will, and until we reach the grassroots.
Thank you.
From up,
Thank you.
Up, bottom up, bottom to up. So that is it. Thank you.
Let's go to Philip quickly.
Yeah. So I want to start by just going back to what Adaku raised. I think she raises some very compelling points in there, and I want to combine that with what David is saying. And I think while that was the definition of food security, I like to always employ this idea of, I have a tool I use, so I have this idea of concept versus conception. When I think of food insecurity as a young person, and I think of our generation, I think of generations to come, I think it could be posed as two questions. One is, how do we make agriculture more economically viable? That's the question of, so how do we make sure that the welfare of farmers who are involved in actually bringing the food to the table where agriculture starts, that their livelihood is uplifted? The second question, again at the macro level, that we've got to raise in this generation is the question of, how do we enhance productivity? Gone are the times when it was about, how do I buy more land and increase production? But with the pre-existing land that has been put to use, how do we enhance and how do we increase productivity? That's going to be a key question. But that also brings me to a larger question. We talk about economic viability, to what the role of the European Union, and two, I want to also talk about the role of government. So, finally, I want to finish with the issue of gender. So with regards to the issue of the European Union, I think it's important for all players and all businesses across the European Union who are in this value chain to embrace ethical supply chain. Think of, well, as you purchase that food, has that food been ethically sourced? What is the livelihood of the farmers involved within that? That is going to be a fundamentally key issue. So ethical supply chain should be something that players from across Europe embrace. The second bit is with regards to policy. As more young people seek to enter the agricultural value chain and innovate and earn a living in that, the time is now for African government to adopt an innovation and digital strategy. Times of the talk of mid-months.
Philip, I think we're having a little bit of connection issue with you, and we're actually running very, very close to the end of the session. So I still want to give Kenneth and Adaku the word before we close this off. So Kenneth, any last points that you want to make before we close this?
Certainly. So all that I would want to say is there's no new solution out there, right? And there are enough solutions out there, and a lot of you'd have innovative ideas that they are trying to implement, of which a lot of them also failed equally. But all that I would also want to add is it depends on how you're able to be strategic, how you're able to see things from a different point of view, instead of sitting somewhere and just, coming up with theoretical ways to solve certain practical problems on the field. So you have to know your pain, or you try to say the problem very well, and know how to go to market and know how to be sustainable. The sustainability part is very key. As much as you are also trying to create a solution that would serve a social impact, you also have to look at something that would also help you to be sustainable going forward. So that should be looked at. And also in terms of women empowerment, we live in a continent where women play a major or a massive role in our activities, especially in our culture. And when you're coming up with certain solutions, you shouldn't be gender biased. In my part of the continent, as in Ghana, in some parts of Ghana, they put women, to the kitchen and all that. Or when the women have a farm and the men have a farm, they say you have to do the men's farm first before you go to the women's farm. But then when you look at the size, the women are doing more than that of the men. So we always say that you don't have to be gender biased, because even when doing that, the women are even doing better as compared to the men. So you need to know what you want to do. You need to know where you see yourself in the next, let's say, 5 years. That sustainability to me is very key, and how your solution will be adopted is also key.
Super, thank you, Kenneth. And Adaku, for some final thoughts.
I'm optimistic. I have a lot of optimism because of the young populace that we have who really want to change stuff. But we need a lot of support, both from the government end and even from institutional partners like the European Union, the World Bank, IFAD, to be able to create an opportunity for people to try things and fail. It's okay to try things and not be successful the first time, right? Because you can never get it right. It's by learning what cannot work that you know what will work. So let us not be afraid of designing solutions in theory that may not work practically. But of course, having that human-centered design approach to even conceptual building is very, very important. So I think that the young people, we have a huge challenge ahead of us to solve this problem. We have 2.4 billion people to feed at least, and feed them well. And so that should be something that you go to bed at night, you wake up to think about how do we do it. But I'm very optimistic. I'm optimistic because you have the drive. I'm optimistic because we even have young people now thinking about this solution and entering into this market and creating solutions that we never didn't think about will happen. Another reason for optimism is that even though the clienteles that we are dealing with have low literacy and low information, you're also seeing that is going to be changing because their children, the farmers' children are going to school, and some of them will still continue what their parents are doing, but with more, with the science to it. So in all, I'm optimistic about our continent. I'm optimistic because I think we will solve the food problem in Africa.
Thank you. We're really running out of time. We have the next panel starting in about 2 minutes. So I'd like to end by thanking all of the panelists for this fruitful discussion, which I hope was inspirational and motivational for the teams at this hackathon, who are addressing a very clearly important topic. And as we can see by the number of ideas that were submitted on this category, it touches their drive, it touches their energy. And as Philip put it, it is something that young people are very passionate about. So I'd like to thank you all for being part of this panel, and best of luck to all the teams that are working on this challenge. And I hope that you have very fruitful next 3 days working on your ideas. And let's see what comes out during the finals. So that's it for this panel. The next one is going to start shortly on health and wellness. Thank you once again to all the panelists.